This is a workshop about creating Unity tools. So extending the Unity editor with things that can be handy for level design and game design, um, even in the small scope of a game jam. Although sometimes it takes a lot of practice, especially for the trickier parts, to be able to use it in a game jam setting. But I'm gonna show four things if I have time to fit them all in. The first is running code in the editor, so like before you're playing, um, using a context menu. The second thing is creating your own asset types using scriptable objects, and using that for data in the game. So like sharing a bunch of values or references to objects. The third thing is making your own custom inspectors and property drawers. So it's like really customizing how things are shown in Unity for the sake of like making something clear or simple. And then the fourth thing I want to do when we get there is to make a custom editor window that's dockable within the UI. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say that I think Unity is can be a great place to learn programming because um, you make a you have an object in the scene, and then you can make a script for that object, and then within the script you have access to the properties of that object. Um, so So if we make a new script and name it something, I'm not very good at multitasking. So when I'm focusing on typing something, I'll stop talking, and I'm sorry about that. I'm not like a speed runner. Can't do those things. Um, but yeah, if we make a script, um, and then go into the script to edit it, um, this this script is placed. It's a component on an object in the scene. This cube is what has this script on it that I just made. And from here you can like feel out about um, what you can do, what you can change. So if I say uh, transform dot local scale is new new vector three, to make it double scale, um, then you can. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Good, good. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to do that, but I can totally do. This is like here we go. Yeah, no problem. That's probably good. Um, so yeah, when like this script has this function on it, and when you hit play, uh, it does it, and like it's not clear, but it's double size now. And when I stop, it resets to what it was before. So you can feel it out like that, and I think that makes it a great place to learn programming, or it can. Um, Something that's really important when learning about this stuff is to have a developer environment where you have IntelliSense enabled. So like I'm getting the suggestions about what I can type in there. So if I have transform, like I can see that the scale is in there, but also other properties and functions that I can change, and like just that together makes it very easy to get into programming. I think this is all just a lead up before I really start. Um, but yeah, when you make a new script, you're making a model behavior, which is a special kind of class that has these two functions that Unity controls. And like the comments say, start happens when you press play once, and update happens every frame as fast as the game can run. And so that's a good place to get started here. And actually, you're when you're modifying this script, you're already doing some things that are um, editor tools related. Um, so if uh, this has a public uh, property, then here in the in Unity, it shows up, so you can, fill that with the camera or something. You're creating this interface here. And just things like picking what things are named and what order they come in can it is part of developing tools. Um, yeah, the way that the mono behavior is tied into the interface in Unity makes it already part of tools. Um, there's some other cool things that Unity offers you in tools. If you make an enumeration, uh, and it has some values, say like push, ease, and hit, sure. So I made up this enum, and it's just like what an enumeration is it just assigns number values to these words that you get. So you're making a connection between the names and the numbers. Um, so if this has one of those as well, that shows up in Unity. But the way that an enum shows up is not just the number representation. You get a little drop down, and so like this is like very helpful for making making tools, because the way that this drop down interface works is um, easy to use when you're putting things together. Okay, so then see another thing, just one more example of something that Unity offers here is that if you have a class, um, and I'm making up these names, by the way, but I've prepared what I wanted to name everything beforehand. These are names that I'm choosing. These are things that I'm choosing. Um, so if I make a class that has members, and then put one of those inside this game object, um, and those will show up as well. But actually, it won't show up just yet because um, Unity needs to be specifically told that this is a class that's allowed to be used in this way. So we just tell it that it's a serializable class using this attribute in square brackets. This is an attribute that goes above a class. So this is a class attribute. So we tell it it's serializable, and now in Unity, this shows up here, and it's got a little drop down. So you can use that just to categorize things, or you can use that to encapsulate parts that you want to share. Um, in another class, you can use that again. Okay, so I'm just going to put this in here. This is going to have that, and then also the interaction type is going to go into this class. That's actually where I meant to put those, but following my own notes a little, uh, not exactly. All right. So now the first topic is running code in the editor. So let's say we have um, a configuration that we want to do on this object. So we can imagine or this goes in here. Oh, it's both. Sorry. Okay. So maybe we want to when we configure this object, we want to say the number of hits is going to be a random number um, between 1 and 6, say, or like 1 to 5. The way that random range works is that it's expecting your length to go in here. So 6 actually gives us values that go up to 5. Um, okay, so you can see here that when we hit when we hit start, it's going to set that, and I'll just show that. So here it is 0. It's no longer expected. Start. Maybe I didn't save. Oh, no, I was looking in the wrong place. Okay. Maybe that was working already. Okay, so there it rolled a 5. Um, and so that's happening doing the configuration when we start the level or the game or the scene. But if we wanted to do that in in the editor instead, this is just an example. It might not make sense to be editor code, but we'll see. First of all, I'll put that into a function. And if you were to call this in start, that would be exactly the same thing. So if we want to run code at editor time, there's an attribute that we can use here to connect to some Unity interface things called a context menu. And this goes on top of a function, and the function has to have a void return type and no parameters. So like this one has empty brackets here and it's type void. And then we give it a name to show in the UI, and just put configure in there too. And now in Unity, this shows up in the context menu for the behavior. So the destructible barrier configure or script is down here. And we can right click. We just added this entry here to run that code. And so when we run it, it is rolling that. And so that's kind of it. It's really simple. You can make a setup or a tool that you can run in a really easy way by doing that. And you could, if you wanted to extend that with like searching the scenes for all the objects with a special name or a certain component on it, doing operations on them. Now, in this case where we set a parameter on this, there's something that we should keep in mind. There's an extra step we have to do. So if I save the scene and it's got no star there, if I change this normally, then the star shows up. The scene is modified. If I save again, when I run this, the number changed, but the star didn't show up. So that change isn't registered as having happened from the Unity editor's point of view, and that means that you can have data that's lost, or some of it you keep and some doesn't, and you can get into very confusing states. And that's kind of a real barrier to starting to use Unity tools. It's like I made this script to save me time, but then I actually introduced more bugs, and that's gotten me before. But in this case, there's another fairly simple step that you add here. We can use the undo system. So in the Unity editor library, there's an undo class, and then we're going to record this object. And the object that we give it is this component itself, because that's where the parameters are changing. They're changing on this object. If you were, changing the transform, you could record transform. If you were changing the name of the object, you could record the game object. And you also need to give it a name. So just put configure here. So if we do that, then not only is it safe when we run this, we get the scene modified asterisks up here, but we also can undo. We can go back to So if we run this, it's 2 right now, we run it to 3, we run it to 2, we can undo to go back to 3 and then back to 2. Um, so that's almost done as well. There's a problem where the Unity editor namespace exists only when the editor is running. So if I was going to make a build of this, then this would cause a compiler error. But we can do one more thing to check if Unity editor is defined. Good. So if we surround just that one function, or just that one call, then that means when we make a build, this function shows up kind of like that. This exact line weren't part of it, and it should still work. We have some options about where we can put these. So we could put them just around this one call, so we don't get undo if we're running, which makes sense. You can't undo anyways. We could put it around both of these lines, so it doesn't do the configuration, but you can still call this function. Or we could put it around the whole function, and in this case, this function doesn't exist. So the only place this is being called right now is through that context menu, and the context menu also doesn't exist when you make a build. But there's nothing preventing me from calling this as well. So if I left it like this, now I would have an error when trying to build, but it would be on this line because that function doesn't exist. But yeah, this is kind of the simple way to do it. You just don't record the undo. That was the only thing you needed to do with the editor here. And that's it. All right. So yeah, that's kind of the most simple editor tool that I can think of, and it's also one that I use all the time. So if I'm making a special thing that's going to work in some special way, I make a setup function that's just you can find it in here and use it. But it's a little hidden, and I'll come back to that in a second. All right, the next most useful thing is to make scriptable object assets. So you make your own asset type essentially to hold data usually. Okay, so what I was going to do is close that because I'm going to move it into the scripts folder here. And then I'm going to create another script, and this one is going to be my data asset. I'm going to call it barrier type, barrier asset. Yeah, the theme that I'm using for this is that this is a destructible object. So there's like, what ways can you destroy it? The enum is like touching it, pushing it, hit using the use button, or hitting it, uh, and like number of hits if it's used like that. Okay, so this barrier asset class we've made. There's only one way to make a new script in Unity through that interface. It always assumes you're going to be making one of those mono behavior components. But if we want to make an asset type, we're not going to be creating a mono behavior. We're going to be inheriting from a scriptable object instead. And in a scriptable object, start and update don't mean anything. They aren't special functions like they are in mono behavior. And yeah, this is now a class that you can put data in. So let's see. So if this has a destruction condition, yeah. Okay, so now we've defined this class, and it's an asset. It's a special asset type, and if we go back to the barrier, we can add an asset of that type or a member of that type, and in Unity that shows up. So now this has a special slot here that's looking for, it's set to none right now, but it's looking for an asset of type barrier asset, which is one that we just made. Now there isn't one in the project, and there isn't an easy way to create one except um, by adding the an attribute here to create an asset. So this is another attribute that we can use here. So if we make a scriptable object class and give it this attribute, then we'll be able to make instances of that through the create menu in the project view. And so our class name shows up there. So it's a new barrier asset. That's fine. Let's call it debris. And this has the data members that we specified on it before. So let's say the debris needs you to hit it, and it takes 3 hits. Actually, let's go back and change that. So destruction condition has a uh, minimum number of hits and a maximum. So let's say debris takes 1 to 5. And then now we can drop this asset into that slot here. And so our barrier in the scene has that reference. And so we can do something like this in our configure function. Take that out, sorry. We're going to set uh, the minimum and maximum, not with these hard-coded values, but from the values from the barrier asset. So collision. And +1 just because of how the random works there. Okay, and then as a cleanup, I'm just going to take out the destruction condition that was on that. All right, so now when we run that configure, it's pulling the minimum and maximum values from this 1 to 5. So like have another one, and this one can be stone barrier. Say that one takes 10 to 15 hits. Then we configure this, we get 1 to 5, but if we put in the other one, we get 1 to 15 or 10 to 15. And so, yeah, so that lets you sort of isolate some of the settings that were around. Like really, you could just have a prefab for this cube, this barrier, um, and you could have many different prefabs. But using an asset like this lets you isolate some things that you want to be able to change and have them apply to different things without actually making changes to the prefab. In this case, each of these instances are supposed to have a random number from those values. Um, and so if they were a prefab, you couldn't apply the minimum and maximum in the same way. So this is like prefabs are a great tool that you have when you use Unity, and this is just an alternate tool. Okay, now let's add one more of these. Let's say something flimsy. So this one using that drop down would it just breaks when you touch it is the idea. Okay. Okay, so then the third topic that I'm going to talk about now is to make customizable inspectors. And this new barrier asset that breaks when you touch it is is the example for that where these other two settings here are not related anymore. They only apply when you have hit selected, but when you have touch, these are just irrelevant. Um, but that's actually a small problem, and maybe you would just not not bother with making sure those were hidden. But you could use a custom inspector to draw this in a way that only shows the ones that are relevant based on those conditions. Um, okay, what I'm going to do is make an inspector for the cube or for the destructible barrier. And yeah, the the reason that I want to make that, or that I'm showing to make that, is that this configure button is actually supposed to be a prominent part of the interface. It's underneath this context menu, which means that uh, you have to first of all know that it's there. You have to, or like check here to see if there's anything there. But what we can do with a custom inspector is make a button for it and make it very prominent. So in order to make a custom inspector, we make an editor folder. So within the scripts folder or wherever you want, if you make a folder that's named editor, that tells Unity to ignore that folder during a build. Similar to the precompiler definitions, if Unity editor is enabled or isn't enabled, then don't use these. Anything inside these folders just won't be available at a build time. And so if you have references to that, they'll fail when you try to make a build. But generally, if you're making scripts to use the Unity editor system, they should be inside an editor folder. So I'm gonna make a new script in here, and uh, this is an inspector for the destructible barrier. So I'd call it destructible barrier inspector. Okay, and just like before, the new C# script in Unity gives us a mono behavior, and it's not going to be a mono behavior. In fact, we're going to add using Unity Editor up top, because basically everything in here is gonna be referencing is gonna be from the Unity Editor area. So the class that we uh, inherit from is called editor, and that's a little confusing, but an editor is what shows up in the inspector view, and then there's a special attribute for it, uh, custom editor, and you pass into that the type that you want this to count as the inspector for. So destructible there. And again, start an update. Don't apply to this. But what we're going to do is override a function called on inspector GUI. And if you have IntelliSense set up, it's easy. You don't have to remember everything about it. And so what this is going to do is just call the base function, and that will draw it exactly the same. Um, or another thing you can put here is draw default inspector. Yeah. And so now we have made a replacement inspector, but it draws everything exactly the same. And just to check if we have control here, if we've made it correctly, let's have it do nothing instead. And when that reloads, it's empty. It's just like, it doesn't draw any of the properties. So let's bring that back, and here's what we're here to do. We're gonna if good layout button, and we'll putting a name for the button here. Again, configure. So here we've got a button that we added, and it doesn't do anything because I didn't put anything inside those brackets. But now we've drawn the inspector just like normal, and then added one thing, a button. So now we just wanted to do the same thing that's in there. What that is, it's well, the inspector has something called target. It's built into it, but it's generic. It's a Unity engine object. Um, so we can't actually call the function on it unless we take that and sort of pass it or get it as the type we want. So we'll say um, destructible barrier target. Uh, target as destructible barrier, and then now we can say destructible barrier dot figure. All right, so now that button is connected, and when we push it, it rolls that. And so it's like, first of all, it's a tiny thing, but it's much easier to to use than that was. And in one way, when the game is running, pulling up this context menu pauses the game. It like takes input away. So having this as a button lets the game continue to flow while you do it. So it can be very handy for that. Um, okay, and then if we if I select both of these, we get this warning that says multiple object editing is not supported. Um, but if I hadn't made the inspector, it would have worked fine. If I select multiples of these assets, we see that it displays them, and it just uses a dash for anything that's got multiple different values. So first of all, it's very easy to support that if all we're doing is adding a button. Um, there's an attribute for that as well, which is can edit multiple objects. So now that message will go away if we select it again. Now it's able to show them. And let's see if we had a different number of hits on this, 5 on that one, then it shows a dash because there's multiple values there. But there's a problem here where if we hit configure, uh, the one that was 5 changed, but the one that's 14 didn't change. Yeah, so it's like it's only doing it on the top one, or the last selected maybe. It's confusing. So we can support that as well here. So yeah, basically, Draw Default Inspector is already set up to support multi-selection. If you were going to go in and draw each field yourself, to like draw a list as flat or something like that, so it wasn't a foldout anymore, it just listed them all and didn't let you change it. If you were going through and like specifying things, then you'd actually have to do a lot of work to support that multi-editing functionality. But if we're just using Draw Default Inspector, then it works the way that we expect, uh, except for this button. The button that we added is, getting the target, and it's like the one target. But there's actually another like target field that we can use. So we can just loop through targets, plural, uh, loop through all of those. And then for each thing that's held, we'll just get targets I. So we'll loop through and one at a time, get target I as a destructible barrier, and then call this on it. Okay, so now we've got 14 and 11. Oops. If we run that, we've got 10 and 12. So they both were triggered by that. Okay. It's harder to see because there's a dash there, but it's working. Okay, so that supports multi-selection now, and you don't have to go that extra distance to support that. But when when you've got a bunch of things in a scene, it's just really handy to be able to select them all and say do it on each thing. Um, it really depends on what your setup is for your game, but these are the kind of convenience things that are fairly easy to do. Okay, so then there's uh, another sort of custom interface that I can show you that is more difficult, but it's still doable. And that's this situation where if this is anything but the hit version, then we don't need to draw those two. Since this is a its own class, I can make an inspector just for this class type, and then whenever it shows up in another interface, in the inspector for this asset, or if I put it back into this behavior in the inspector for this behavior, I could have it drawn in a special way. And let's see, how much time have I got? I think I've got enough time. I'm gonna do it. Okay, so we're gonna make a new script, and this is gonna be destruction condition, property drawer. And then let's see, this is gonna using media editor. It's gonna be property drawer, and this is custom property drawer. For the destruction condition. All right, and then these functions are part of that. We're gonna override this time two functions. We're gonna override on GUI and get property height. Get property. Okay, so the first place where using one of these is difficult is that if you just leave this with the base functions, uh, it doesn't work for that. We get some garbage here. Um, and so it's like this property jars like really demand a lot more than custom inspectors, and that may change in the future. And I think there's an alternate UI system you can use that also makes some of this easier. But yeah, let's try returning. We know that this component has three members, and they're each one line big. So let's one line tall. So let's try uh, GUI utility dot single line height times 3. So there. Now it's not folded over on itself, but it says up here no GUI implemented, which is not a great start. Um, Also going to add the spacing between these. And 2 spaces between these two things. Okay, and then let's see. Um, yeah, so we'll have to measure the size of this property ourselves, and then in here we get a rectangle, and we can't use the layout functions. We can't say draw property 1, draw property 2, draw property 3. We have to say draw property and specify where we want it to draw uh, sort of within this rectangle. And that involves like slicing it up and counting. It's pretty tricky. And I wonder now if I should just kind of paste in some code to speed this along a bit. So I'm not exactly on time. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so in the GUI, let's take that out, and we'll just get the first one. Okay, so this is capturing a property. Uh, yeah, so we're getting it by its name, getting the property for that, and then we're creating a rectangle for it, um, and sort of counting that out inside this rectangle. So we're going to say it starts at X and Y, but it's going to be just starting one line down, and then it's going to be one line tall. Um, let's just see what that looks like, and then I think I'm actually gonna. Maybe I'll just paste in the rest of the code and show you what the final thing will be like. But yeah, right now it's got one property drawn, so it's a lot of work to get it to work correctly. But let's see. It's just ended up with a different name.
Will you be providing this code afterwards?
Yeah, I'll save these files. I'll just zip the scripts folder, and I'll paste that in, and it should work with many different versions of Unity.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the drawing function. So it ends up showing a drop down with just one. It's bad. Okay. Okay, I can't kind of, I feel like I gotta skip this and move on. Let me try taking the second function contents. Oh yeah. Oh no, this is working correctly actually. It's just that when it's on hit, it hides, or when it's not on hit, it hides the other two. So this is working correctly now. And I'm sorry that it was just like pasted in there. I don't think I have time to go through all this. Just and it would be boring when I wouldn't be able to talk while I'm typing. There's so much typing in this section. But yeah, essentially what we're doing inside this is using the property that comes in, what's the kind of parent property that we're drawing, and we're searching for the property within it using the name of the one we expect to be there, and then cutting each property its own special rectangle to be drawn in. So it's a lot of custom work, and you can sort of clean this up and make it easier with some utility functions, but you have to write all those utility functions yourself. So this is the thing that's like, the tiniest thing that you just like in a game jam, probably no, don't do it. But the way that it takes away those irrelevant um, fields can can make the difference when it's late at night and you're trying to, put together one last level or something, and that level is so important because it makes the narrative of the game make sense, and it's nothing without it, or whatever. But just having those things disappear can make a big difference. So like this is the kind of thing that you can invest when you have your attention, and your capabilities, you can make this easier for Midnight Elliot, who hasn't eaten yet, to jump in and still put a lot of levels together or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, it's like it's difficult to um, it's difficult to justify the amount of time that you put into editor tools when that development is taking away from the time to actually make the game and the functionality. But when you make it an easier place to work, you can really do a lot of things that would just not be possible under some conditions. So this is really something that I'm passionate about, advocate for. And it's not too difficult, and it's hard. This property drawer stuff is probably too hard. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Okay, so the last topic is to make a dockable editor window. So again, we're going to make a new script in the editor folder, and I'm going to call this level tools window. And if we head into that script again using Unity Editor, and this time it's going to be an editor window. Cool. And these functions aren't used. Take those away. This time there's no attribute, and but there is an attribute on a function. So this is a valid definition of an editor window right now, but there's no way to open it. So can make a static function, and the static function means that it can be accessed on the class, not just an instance. It's important that this is static because it's going to create an instance. And you can call it anything. I'm going to call it init for short for initialization, and this is going to do just get window of this type. So it's when this is a function that is within the Unity editor library. It's within editor window. If you get a window of a type, it creates an instance if there isn't one, and otherwise it'll return one that's already open. So this init function will do that. And in order to be able to call this static function, we can add it to the menu bar at the top of Unity using an attribute. This is menu item, and into menu item we can pass in the path using slashes for which folder we want it. So if we wanted it to go in the window folder, we could do something like this. Little rules window. But actually, let's put it in its own new one. Just call it demo. All right, so now this demo folder has shown up here in the file menu. You know, the demo menu is here, and there's an entry for level tools window. And if we hit that, we've got this window that we just made, and it's it's there, it's resizable, it's dockable as well. You can put it somewhere in the interface if you want, or have it floating. Um, on a Mac, if you have it floating, clicking on Unity will hide it, but in Windows, they'll always stay floating on top. Okay, so we've got this space that what do we do with this? Let's put a button there. So we're gonna this I was about to override again, but in this case it's more like start and update. This function is just specially named on GUI. And in here, after having to make a property jar with custom rectangles and stuff, it's a big relief. Right now, we actually can use the layout utilities again. Just button. There's a button here. And there it is. Now there's a window with a button. So you have a folder with your level editor tools in there. And let's just see. There's some other cool things that I'll put in here. You can do label. And do um, a horizontal, uh, some layered things here. So between these begin and end horizontals, anything we put in will be put into a layer together. So if we had several buttons here, those will be next to each other. And that's a little cut off. I think we could make that wrap. But yeah, now we have, a little layout of buttons. Something else. Let's do all right. If we wanted to give this a like a slot that you can put a target into, we can do that. Uh, but that one won't be drawn automatically. So those members are not connected to this onGUI function the way that the inspector is, where all of those members are shown. They're still serialized. They're still part of this object, as if it were a component here, but they're not drawn automatically. So we do that manually, and the way we do that is by first capturing the scriptable object, or capturing the serializable object for this window. So serializable object, serializable object, new serializable object from this. And then when we have that, we can grab the property with the same name from here. So serializable property, let's make this the target property. And then we can display the property. Like that. So now there's a slot here. We can put the cube in there, but it doesn't show up because even though it's found the property to draw there, um, we didn't apply those changes. We have to do those manually too. So usually at the end of onGUI, you do apply modified properties. And now there's a slot for you to drop that cube into. So these could be, aligning it X, Y, Z, or I don't know. Your imagination is the only limit for what you can do here. Um, yeah, another great thing about learning to program in Unity is that there are so many developers uh, and so many beginner developers that when you have a problem, you can use Google to search for it, and you get like a lot of responses for it. So the hardest part is knowing what specifically to search for. But even then, if you have if you have a vague description of what's happening, you can usually find things that point you in the right direction. So there's really so many other places for this to go that like I'd love to keep showing more here, but I didn't prepare all of that, and also just about out of time. So one more thing that I should show is that you don't let's say this was an array instead, just so that I can make it taller. This has many elements now. We don't we actually run out of space, and so the interface at the bottom can't be reached here without resizing the window. So another thing you need to do manually is to make a scrolling scrolling area. So you do that with vector 2 for scroll, and then here we lay out again scroll view, and you supply the scroll into that, and you also capture it back out of that when you draw it, and then you also need to the scrolling view. Yeah. Oh, okay. So there we go. Now there's a scrolling view. That's important. Okay, I think that's all that I have time for. It's also just about everything. Sorry, I skipped through the property drawer section, but it would have been boring anyway, so it's the right thing to cut. Um, I hope that you all have a great game jam and have fun, and maybe experiment with one or two of these things. I'll post the scripts folder from here so that you can have an example if you want. Does anyone have a 1 minute or less question that they want to ask?
I have a question if it's all right.
Sure.
Um, when I see Unity tutorials and examples online, I notice that people tend to flip back and forth between having public variables for like the serialized thing and just using serialized field private variables. Is there like a preferred method for that?
Yeah, I think having it be private and serialized is the preferred method. And the reason for doing that is really that um, when you make a script, you are exposing an interface. Anywhere that you can reference that script, you can sort of see all of the properties of it. And if those are properties that you don't want to be changed by another script, then you want to keep that clean. So making them private and serialized shows them in the UI, but makes it so that they don't confuse someone accessing it from another script from somewhere else in the code base. So I think yeah, private and serialized is the preference. And I sort of am inclined to leave them public in order to just let me experiment with things. So it's like, I mean, it's related to hiding those fields, when they're not relevant. You want to not
Right.
have that interface exposed when it's not relevant. So it's really to help you clean up that sort of thing.
Okay. Thank you.
Go for it. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all for coming to my TED Talk about Unity editor tools, and hope that you all enjoyed it, and I really hope that you all have a fun game jam. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you, Elliot. It was great. See you all at the next workshop, everyone.
See you next
Tomorrow.
time.
Bye.
Bye.